What if I told you that the sound your parents once called noise changed music forever? Heavy metal did not just appear. It was born out of rebellion, power, and pure volume. From the thunder of Black Sabbath to the chaos of thrash and the spectacle of modern metal, this is the story of how a genre terrified the mainstream and conquered the world. This is the complete history of heavy metal. When we talk about heavy metal, most people think of Black Sabbath in the 1970s. But to really understand where this music came from, we need to go back much earlier. Decades before Tony Iommi ever picked up his guitar. The roots before metal. The story starts in the 1940s and 50s with blues and early rock and roll. Artists like Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, and Little Richard were experimenting with distorted guitar sounds, loud amplification, and raw energy. These were small steps, but they laid the foundation. By the late 1950s, rock music became more rebellious. Elvis Presley shocked mainstream America. Chuck Berry's guitar riffs influenced generations. Even Link Wray's 1958 instrumental Rumble was banned from some radio stations because its distorted guitar was considered too aggressive. In the 1960s, this raw energy merged with new technologies. Amplifiers got louder, distortion pedals became common, and bands started experimenting with volume and heaviness. British blues rock bands like Cream, the Yardbirds, and the Rolling Stones took American blues and cranked it up. At the same time, psychedelic rock added experimentation, feedback, and darker lyrics. Jimi Hendrix was a key figure here. He turned the guitar into a weapon. Loud, distorted, unpredictable. Songs like Purple Haze and Voodoo Child showed how far the electric guitar could go. All of this created the environment where something heavier could finally emerge, the birth of heavy metal. By the late 1960s, three bands stood at the crossroads: Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath. Led Zeppelin mixed blues and hard rock with a heavier edge, pioneering the arena rock sound. Deep Purple brought speed and classical-inspired solos, especially with songs like Highway Star. But it was Black Sabbath, from Birmingham, England, that truly crossed the line. In 1970, their debut album, Black Sabbath, introduced the sound of doom: slow, down-tuned riffs, sinister atmosphere, and lyrics about fear, death, and the supernatural. Their second album, Paranoid, released the same year, gave us Iron Man and War Pigs, songs that still define heavy metal today. This was the official birth of heavy metal. The 1970s, defining the genre. After Sabbath, other bands expanded the style. Judas Priest, also from Birmingham, stripped away the blues influence and gave metal a cleaner, sharper, twin guitar attack. They also helped create the visual style: leather, studs, spikes, that became iconic. Meanwhile, bands like Scorpions in Germany and UFO in the UK spread heavy metal across Europe. By the late 70s, metal wasn't just music, it was a movement. The new wave of British heavy metal, late 1970s to early 1980s. Out of the struggling British economy, a new generation of bands emerged. Iron Maiden, Saxon, Def Leppard, Diamond Head. They were faster, hungrier, and more aggressive. This movement became known as the new wave of British heavy metal, or NWO/BHM. Iron Maiden, in particular, took metal to new heights, with complex songwriting, galloping rhythms, and epic themes. Albums like The Number of the Beast in 1982 became blueprints for future generations. At the same time, Judas Priest's British Steel, 1980, showed how heavy metal could be sharp, direct, and stadium-ready. In the 80s, heavy metal split into two main directions. Glam metal ruled the radio and MTV. Bands like Mötley Crüe, Poison, and Bon Jovi filled arenas with big hair, flashy outfits, and catchy anthems. It was commercial, fun, and built for mass audiences. But underneath, something much heavier was growing. Thrash metal emerged from both the UK and the United States. Inspired by NWO/BHM and hardcore punk, thrash bands played faster, more aggressive, and more political. The Big Four, Metallic, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax, dominated the underground. Albums like Master of Puppets and Rain and Blood set a new standard for speed and aggression. By the mid-80s, Thrash was global, with scenes in Germany, with Crater, Sodom, Destruction, and Brazil, with Sepultura. The rise of extreme metal late 1980s to 1990s. Thrash paved the way for even more extreme sounds. Death metal emerged in Florida, with bands like Death, Morbid Angel, and Obituary pushing guttural vocals, blast beats, and brutal riffs. In Sweden, Entombed and Dismember added a raw, chainsaw-like guitar tone. Black metal exploded in Scandinavia, especially Norway. Early bands like Mayhem Burzum and Darkthrone created an icy, raw, atmospheric sound. With corpse paint and controversial anti-religious imagery, it became one of the most notorious movements in music history. Meanwhile, doom metal carried on Sabbath's legacy with slower, heavier, crushing riffs, led by bands like Candlemasses, Trouble, and Saint Vitus. The 1990s. The diversity and new directions in the 1990s. Metal splintered into dozens of styles. Groove metal, led by Pantera and Sepultura, slowed thrash down into crushing riffs with huge power. Progressive metal, with Dream Theater, Opeth, and Tool, brought complexity and musicianship to new levels. Nu metal, with Korn, Slipknot, and Linkin Park, mixed hip-hop, funk, and electronic influences into metal, reaching massive mainstream popularity at the same time. Melodic death metal from Sweden, bands like In Flames, At the Gates, and Dark Tranquillity, introduced harmonized riffs and influenced the rise of metalcore in the US, the 2000s and beyond. The global metal by the 2000s. Heavy metal had become a global culture. Festivals like Wacken, Open Air in Germany, and Download in the UK drew massive crowds. The internet spread underground bands worldwide. Metalcore and deathcore combined extreme metal with breakdowns and modern production. Bands like Killswitch Engage, Parkway Drive, and Whitechapel gained international followings. Ghent, led by Meshuggah, and later Periphery, focused on polyrhythms and low-tuned guitars, pushing the boundaries of technicality. Meanwhile, the classics never died. Iron Maiden still headline stadiums. Metallica still sell out arenas. Black Sabbath returned for a final tour in the 2010s. Heavy metal, today, metal is more diverse than ever. From the traditional heavy metal sound to doom, sludge, folk, symphonic, progressive, and every extreme you can imagine, heavy metal has become a global language of power, rebellion, and community. What started in the blues clubs of the 1950s and the factories of Birmingham in the 1970s has grown into one of the most powerful and enduring movements in modern music history. Heavy metal isn't just music anymore. It's a culture, a brotherhood, a sound that refuses to die. If you made it all the way to the end, respect. Thank you so much for watching. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment and tell me your all-time favorite metal band. I want to see who rules in the comments. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed the ride, and subscribe so you don't miss the next dive into metal history. Until then, stay heavy.